name is Jenny, and I'm a wife and mom raising 2 kids. But I used to live a more glamorous life as a TV reporter. I was on the nightly news interviewing pop stars and politicians. So when I said goodbye to TV and hello to motherhood, I suddenly discovered what we moms are up against. We live in a world that tells us to be rich and famous, thin and successful. You know, almost nobody says, "Oh, hey, you're a mom? That's fabulous." But you are fabulous, and I'm here to tell you why.
It's the Channelmom Show, celebrating you with Jenny Dean Schmidt.
Now, we have a fabulous guest coming up, and I'm going to urge you to call her if you have any questions. Our number here is 303-297-1510. Her book is brutal in a way because it's very honest about what some moms are feeling across America, but you may identify with some of what she says. Let me just tell you, she opens the book with some questions and says that these are some typical questions for moms who feel like a married mom but a solo parent. Now, before I give you these questions, I want to warn you they're not nice. So be prepared. One of them is, how can I love my husband if I feel like his doormat or his servant or nanny? The other question, would it be easier if I left my husband? Is it okay to pray for my husband to die so that I can respectably marry a different man to be a dad to my kids? And finally, is it okay to meet my sexual needs without my husband or outside of marriage if he's never around or available? That is brutally honest. The woman behind these questions is Carla Ann Coroy, and she's a blogger, speaker, mother of 4, and author of Married Mom, Solo Parent. She has really considered this because it's a life she's lived herself. She's about to answer some of the questions that I just offered up for you. Welcome, Carla.
Hi, good morning. Thanks.
Thanks so much for being here. As I read through your book, women and men are just wired differently. So I suspect that just about every mom has at one point or another felt like she's doing stuff alone, or her husband doesn't do as much as she does, or he doesn't understand the way she wants to raise the kids, or, things like that. And we all have disputes like that. Mm-hmm. But let's start by having you talk a little bit about these brutal questions. Are these typical questions for wives and moms to ask if they feel like they have a husband who isn't involved in their family's life?
I think particularly for women whose husbands are gone a lot or disengaged from family life, particularly emotionally, they don't want to hang out with the kids. They're either gone for work or they're choosing another lifestyle, but yet they're still married. These moms, I think, feel very lonely. They're left in a marriage that they said, I didn't sign up for this. This isn't what I planned. Mm-hmm. And I think they do ask many of these same questions. The women that I've interviewed have asked these same questions plus many more. I think these are some of the most typical questions that some of these moms do ask.
Sure. And you were very honest and kind of laid it out there because this is a life you lived yourself. Tell people, what kind of a mom you felt you were at one point, that you were married, but you felt like a single parent. Tell us about your history.
Yeah, it started actually really early in our marriage. My husband was working on his doctorate, mm-hmm. and so he was busy. He was gone all the time, and then he was also training for track and field. He was a high jumper, so that meant he was gone during the day, gone in the evening, and as time went on, we had children, and I just felt like I was doing it alone. Then when school ended, he took jobs, but those jobs meant that he was traveling. He was traveling sometimes for days, weeks at a time, and when he was home, he'd be gone before the kids were up in the morning and back before they were, before they had been, they'd be gone before they got up, and he was back before after they got put to bed, and they didn't see him. It got to the point where our daughter thought we were divorced because she never saw her dad.
Really? She really thought you were?
That's how it was. It just felt like it was just me and the kids. And so it was a very lonely life. I felt like a single mom, yet somehow I had a husband that I had to nurture a marriage with. I had to raise my kids together with him. I felt like I had to raise my kids to honor a dad, but they didn't ever see him.
Yeah. Well, to be brutally honest, Carla, I'm kind of surprised you conceived 4 children in the middle of that.
Yeah. That's what people have always said. How can you even have 4 children? Your husband's never home.
Right.
But you try to do what you can.
Right. And, I in the beginning of your book, which I have right here, I'll show to the camera, you are pretty honest, and I hope you don't mind my saying, but you kind of complain. You kind of whine about what it was like and how hard it was, but then you hit a turning point where something clicked for you, and this is kind of what I want other moms to tap into out there, because I certainly know moms out there whose husbands are often gone, and I'm certainly not blaming a man who has to work and raise money, but they're often gone, or they're disengaged, or they're into computer games or some other habit that keeps them away from the house. But you finally had to say, this is my life. and I don't want to get divorced, and I want to keep your husband Trent around. What changed for you? What finally clicked that other moms could identify with, and maybe you could get them on that path too?
I think for me, the turning point was it came one day. A woman asked me some really hard questions about my life and about my commitment. I had begun to get involved with another man emotionally. I was not having a physical relationship with him, but my heart was beginning to turn away from my husband, and I wasn't happy at all. Mm-hmm. And she asked me some really hard questions, which turned me to say to God, really, is this what my life is about? Didn't you promise me a happy marriage? And it started a search in Scripture about, did God actually promise me a happy marriage? Yeah. And it came down to me saying to God, I want to come to heaven someday and have you say to me, well done, my good and faithful servant.
Right.
And so what does that mean for this marriage that I don't feel happy in? My children are suffering. How do I do this? And he just gave me pictures for my husband. He changed my whole outlook on what my role was in my marriage and what roles for women in general are in their marriages. And it gave me a passion and a purpose to live completely differently within my marriage. Yeah. And he gave me hope that was just unbelievable strength. I mean, he gave me the ability to do things that up until that point I had not been able to do. For example, not lash out when I was angry. Sure. And frustrated and complaining and whining. And he gave me the strength and grace and words to do those things. And that's where it came from.
Sure. And I get that. But I have a feeling that there are some moms who are listening who think, oh no, don't you tell me that I've got to, serve my husband or support my husband because I got my own life and I want to do what I want to do. And, it certainly goes against a certain cultural mores that's out there that says, you should be a certain kind of woman. You should stand up for yourself. Everything's equal. There should be equal partnership, so on and so forth. And I suspect that you're going to probably tell me something a little bit more traditional than that. Before you do, I remember sitting around a table once with some women. I think it was in a Bible study. And some women were saying, I don't buy into this thing that we have to take a backseat to our husbands or serve our husbands. And it's kind of like they're the smaller apple compared to the big apple. And I said, you know what? It's not a bigger, smaller apple thing. It's an apples and oranges thing. And mm-hmm. I've discovered that the more you feed into your husband, and at first it's so hard because you think, how dare he make me do this for him? Why should I have to be the one that gives more, Yeah. The more I fed into my husband, or the more I feed into my husband, the more I find that it's reciprocated. I mean, just as long as I start it, he comes back with something that I need. And I tell me what you did. Some of the practical approaches and steps that moms can take. And is it along this line that I'm talking about?
I think some of the things are for sure along that line by serving him, by looking at the bigger picture and saying, what is my role as a wife? And understanding that our role as a wife isn't servant and it isn't doormat.
Right.
And it's to look at what is it that God's called me to do? What are the gifts and talents He's given me in this marriage? And how can I serve my husband? And what is it that he needs? And what is it that God has gifted me to give to him? And it's very interesting in Genesis, when God called Eve a suitable helper, we often think that that's exactly what it means. We need to just be a servant. We need to just do all the dirty work. But that's not actually what that verse means. Mm-hmm. Later on in Psalms, he uses that same word for suitable helper when he says, oh, where does my help come from? I look to the Lord. My help comes from the Lord. It's that kind of help. And so that's a high calling kind of help.
Yeah, but for moms who don't buy into that, they don't necessarily follow Scripture. What are some practical things that you could say to them that could get them on the path to saying, I really don't want to leave my husband, but I do feel like I do everything and he does nothing, and I am angry with him, and I find it hard to love him, and I find it hard to be good to him and be the kind of helper that you're talking about that isn't a servant, but that is truly somebody who's feeding into his life in such an important way. How do you get them over that hurdle, and what are some practical things you did? I mean, I know you had some tips in your book about holidays and all kinds of different approaches you took to be a supportive wife, but not to not hold on to the stuff that you'd been holding on to.
I think one of the things is exactly that, leaving room in your family and marriage for him. So when he's gone or when he's not coming home, give him a call, keep him updated, keep those communication lines open so that now with email and Skype, you can keep those conversations going between you and your husband, also between you and your children and your children and your husband. That can be a big circle that often gets dropped. That communication gets dropped when dad's not around. Another thing is to really concentrate on how we're thinking about our husbands and changing how we're thinking so that we're thinking true and honorable and happy, wonderful, lovely thoughts about our husband on purpose, choosing to write down a list of the things that we do like about him. I know one of the things that I wrote down in the book that when I first started doing this, I said, there's nothing I love about him. But yet I sat down, I wrote a list of things I was thankful for, and one of the things was that he had hands that could work. And he had legs, and he could drive. I didn't have to drive him anywhere. It started with some really simple things that I could actually be thankful for. And I think that all of us, when we go back to write the basics, there is something that we can be thankful for, even in those days that we really feel like, there's nothing I like about this guy at all.
Yeah, and he doesn't deserve anything from me. I mean, some moms I can't tell you how many moms I've seen there, like, they really just don't want to do anything for them because they feel like they're doing it all and they're tired of it. I love that you said that it's important the way in which we help, because I have watched two contrasts. I've watched women who have just chosen to nag and be angry, and it's almost like that's a descending cycle where it only gets worse and worse because however she feels about him is how he feels about himself and how he feels about the marriage. And then I've watched women that say, I'm just going to choose to treat him as though he's better than he even is. And then suddenly they rise up to that. At least the men that I have witnessed in this situation where she's made a significant decision, I'm going to start treating him like he's better than he even is, and he starts to rise up to that image because he relies on her for his self-image, It's a great compliment. What about moms who are single, Carla?
It's a hard road to be a mom. It really is a hard road. And when there's not a husband and there's not a partner to come along and help, it can feel very devastating and separated and lonely from everything. Yeah. It's a hard job. Yeah. And I just want to say God is there, and He has promised to be that help and to give us hope. Because in the midst of the mess of motherhood, let's face it, motherhood's not always pretty and neat and tidy.
No, it's not.
It's messy.
Right.
And there's hurt, and there's relationships, and there's stuff that just goes on. And whether you're married or not, even if you're single, the mess of motherhood is there. But God can come in the midst of it and give joy and hope in the midst of all the circumstances.
Sure. But and I agree, and I'm glad that you're offering hope. I just want moms also to remember and that's why we do the show, how important they are. Because I sometimes think they are at that devastated place, like, I can't do this all. I'm wiped out. You can tell me that I'm a great mom, but how do I even love my children? We've got about 30 seconds left. But what would you say about, what are some little verbal things and verbal cues they can say about this matters, my marriage matters, my single motherhood matters? What would you say?
I would say absolutely. You are moms are one of the most important people in our entire culture and society. And in order to do the job well, we need to stand up and say, I'm going to raise the next generation to a higher level, a higher standard. I'm going to do this job well because I've been chosen
1 minute.
Very high level position of mom.
Right.
And we have a high calling. We have a whole generation of people that we're raising to run our countries again. And I think the moms that are listening to your program have the ability to do that job well.
Amen, girl. Well, Carla Ann Conroy, I'm sorry, I keep messing up your name. Conroy, author of Married Mom, solo parent. Fabulous to talk to you. Thank you so much for these tips. I hope some mom out there has gotten just renewed hope that she can do this thing. So thanks for being on the show with us today.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.